A Day and a Life, Chapter 8. Now then, in this book, whenever anything is quoted from the office or from the Bible, it's always given in Latin, because in the 14th century the whole liturgical experience was in Latin. But I always footnote, in the later books at least, I didn't originally, but I went on to consider it was better to footnote in English what the text meant for the quotations. Reading aloud, I find it quite hard to get my tongue round Latin, and I did notice in an earlier chapter I was reading to you, I got a word muddled up, so instead of saying adjuvandum, what you got was adjuvandum, and no, that's not right, is it? So I thought going forward, wherever there's something that is a quotation from the office or from the Bible, I just give it to you in the English. If you read the book, you'll find it's there in the Latin, but it's easier for me to read aloud, and it means that having not got the benefit of footnotes, you have the meaning that you will certainly understand. So, here's chapter 8. As the sun climbs the heaven to its zenith, so the sound of the Angelus bell ringing out from the abbey reminds the villagers to attend to their prayers. And then the brothers set their work aside for the noonday office of sext, the 6th hour of the day. Living and dying, light and dark, they belong to one another. They cannot be picked apart. So it is that Christ, who was called the day star, the morning star, was lifted up on the cross at the 6th hour of the day. As the burning sun tops the heaven, so he was monstrously and agonizingly exalted. And the tale is told that when at noontide they hammered in the nails and raised him high, there was darkness on the face of the earth. I am thirsty, Jesus groaned on his cross. And there was another noontide when the stories of Jesus tell that he was thirsty, the time he sat tired by the well at the edge of a Samaritan village and begged a drink from a woman who came to draw water. He takes it gratefully, but he mystifies her when he says there is a way out of this cycle of weariness, toil and aridity. There is a living fountain that springs up to eternal life. Nobody who drinks from this well will ever be thirsty again. What? Where? The woman is bemused. But that's because she's used to looking outside herself for solutions. This one is hidden deep inside her heart. So at the office of sext, the community turns aside in the heat of the day to refresh themselves at the wellspring, to find the fountainhead that gives their life together, whatever meaning it may have. They go back to the source. After they've done praying, a jug of ale won't go amiss, and the repast Brother Conradus has brought forth from his morning's labours. As Brother Walafrid remarked to Brother Giles only this morning, "It's not all holiness." but Brother Giles capped that one. He lifted his head with a puzzled frown from his fragrant task of macerating herbs. "Yes, it is," he said. And he's right, of course. There's no getting round it. Because a man shall not live by bread alone. They have chapel first and eat afterwards. So sext is not a sleepy office, but sometimes the chant is augmented by the grumbling of stomachs. Today, the first man into chapel is Brother Paulinus. He's old, he's slow, so he set off early to make sure he wouldn't be late. He had to call by the lavatorium and give his hands a good scrub before he came into chapel. He's managed to get most of the earth out from under his fingernails, but he's been podding the last of the beans today before the horn comes down. This afternoon he'll set them out to dry so that they have something to sow come next spring. All through the summer he's been picking beans and podding beans, and his fingers are all stained from bean juice. His hands are clean, he's quite sure of it. They just don't look it. He encountered Father Clement in the lavatorium, also making war on stains, but his are spectacular. He had an awful accident with a pot of red ink in the scriptorium this morning. By some miracle of divine intervention, he can hardly believe even now, none of the manuscripts they were working on were damaged when he sent it flying. Because St Benedict's wisdom was the practical sort, they're all wearing black. So though 3 of them were well spattered, how can you tell? But between trying unsuccessfully to catch the pot when he knocked it and muddling around attempting to mop up, he's got enough red ink on his hands to look as though he committed a massacre. He's upset. With every passing day, some new thing happens to prevent him evading the insidious creep of his failing eyesight. He stands at the sink in the lavatorium, rubbing uselessly at the gory crimson blotches. But it's no good. You'll just have to let it fade with time. He gives up and follows Paulinus into the chapel, sits in his stall, feeling miserable and old. Brother Mark also comes to chapel via the lavatorium. His hands were sticky because it's time to harvest the honey this month. The hive population is dropping, the drones disappearing, but he checked and his queens are still there, though they are laying less and less. Time to replace them, though, now the autumn is coming. Father Gilbert is already in chapel when these old men come in. He glances up from the music he's sorting in readiness for his practice this afternoon and finishes the task as briskly as he can once he sees the community is beginning to gather for the office. Next in is Brother Peter, the ostler. He also goes to wash his hands first and checks his shoes. He should really have changed into different ones for chapel, but he was in a bit of a hurry, so he didn't. After him comes Brother Fidelis, bent and rheumatic, walking slowly, smelling of the herb beds he's been weeding this morning. These days, if he tries to go quickly, he begins to wheeze badly and can't get his breath. It's a matter of taking things gently, he finds, accepting that the vigour of youth is gone. provided he doesn't ask what his old body can no longer give, he can still accomplish most things in peace. Their abbot enters the choir from the archway leading in from the ambulatory and crosses to his stall. He marks the places in the breviary and psalter, then withdraws into himself like a closing sea anemone, hands tucked into the sleeves of his habit, cowl up over his head, eyes closed. The stillness in him makes you feel still, watching him. The Orarium brings a man into church 7 times a day, every day, and there is so much of the Bible that it must be pushed into every nook and crevice of time, at collatio, at mealtime readings, in private devotion, in chapter, at Mass, not just the Divine Office. Understandable if at times he lets it all flow over his head, ceases to engage with the perpetual influx of Holy Writ and commentary thereon. The day breathes in the Holy Word and breathes out prayer and praise, all the time, never stopping. The challenge is to keep it fresh, hold fast to the authentic and direct encounter with the living Christ, not some desiccated construct mistaken for deity, the accretions of dogma and doctrine, of dissertation and opinion, that sometimes posture as, but are not, the Holy Spirit himself. The abbot sits in quietness, nothing in him moving but the patient tides of breath and blood and the inscrutable arcane rhythms of the lumen of the gut. His soul settles over his community as a mother hen fluffs out her feathers, lowering herself gently upon her brood, letting them creep in under her, finding her warmth. Deeper and deeper his spirit settles down, drawing this kindred of common life into his love. At the same time, letting the light of his faith, his heart's yearning, expand upward into the infinite tenderness that bends over him, encloses him, adopts him. Once he finds the still small centre, the quiet home of prayer, he draws in after himself the ways and well-being of Brother Said, pulls the heartache of his absence into the healing citadel of the innermost chamber of his heart. He does not move. His breathing is slow and quiet. He does not open his eyes. He holds Said there, where the lad belongs, with all the rest of them. Brother Walafrid and Brother Giles arrive together. Today they are on the second stage of preparing tinctures for use in the infirmary, plantain and peppermint. They gathered them during the summer, a month or more back, and set them to steep. Now the mixture is seasoned, it's time to strain it through a fine-woven, double-folded cloth, ensuring the final brew is free of sediment and debris. Then it's sealed in the jars and taken to the infirmary. Today, they've also found time to pound some herbs for a poultice to save Brother Michael the trouble. He has enough to do. Father James, looking pleased with life, evidently in buoyant spirits, comes in behind them and settles himself in his stall, opens a breviary, brings across the stitched-in ribbons to keep the page. He glances across at his abbot and then closes his eyes, peace on his face, recalled to stillness. His work has gone well today, flowed easily. The postulant seemed delighted with his robes, and with good reason. They were beautifully made and they sat on him perfectly. It's been a good morning. Father Francis, the prior, is next, his step as light and merry as the day he first came. Not much dims his naturally sanguine spirit, and people like him. Then Father Chad comes down from the library, his gentle, placid features thoughtfully composed. The almoner, Father Gerard, is there in good time. Like the infirmarian, the cook, the teachers, the cellarer, the porter and the guestmaster, he's often late or absent, for it's not always as easy as he'd like to detach himself from the lengthy histories and requirements of the needy. There are no guests at the present time, which is unusual, so Father Dominic is free to come to chapel, which is not always the case when they have a houseful. Brother Martin stays at the porter's lodge, though, and says the midday office quietly on his own. Father Theodore and his novices, except Brother Ced, all arrive in a group from their morning's lessons. Brother Thaddeus takes a while washing clay off his hands and comes into chapel when most of the community is already in place. Brother Richard is there, and Brother Cormac has locked up the checker and is sitting in his stall, turning the pages of the big breviary, finding the place. Brother Stephen, along with Brother Josephus and Brother Placidus, who have been helping him on the farm, slip in at the last minute as Brother Basil finishes ringing the bell and loops back the rope. Father Bernard has been faffing about in the vestry, clearing up some incense he spilled when he was preparing the thurible for High Mass, but the silence alerts him to the imminent start of the office, and he hastens in. Brother Damien isn't there. Someone has to oversee the boys in the school throughout the day. They came into High Mass with him, of course, and he sat with them in the nave, but they don't attend the little hours of the office. Brother Thomas is away until nightfall. Almost everyone who can be there is sitting with recollected composure in his stall. As the abbot gives the knock and the community rises, Brother Michael slides into his place. Nobody minds. If Michael's late, you can't help it in the infirmary. They're just pleased to see him at all. And the last man in is Brother Conradus, cheerful and contented, arriving wreathed in the vague, encouragingly savoury aroma of some kind of stew. The office flows peacefully, as familiar to these men as the pulsing of their heart's blood through their arteries and veins. The opening prayer and the humble presentation of their worship, the Paternoster and the Ave Maria, the invocation the versicle and response, the hymn, and then the psalms of the day. After that, the little chapter and short responsory, the prayer, and the versicles and responses, finishing up with, "May the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace." Then one more paternoster, and sext is accomplished. And tomorrow I'll be reading you chapter 9. Go well. May you be peaceful. May you be contented. May you be free.